It doesn't seem fair that I pay a tenth of my gross. I didn't receive it on my check. Okay, that is how a lot of people feel. They say, well, I'm paying 10% of what I actually received. I didn't actually receive it, so it's not mine. It doesn't seem fair that I should pay a tenth of my gross. I didn't receive it on my check. And that's a good question. It's not an ignorant question. It's a very valid question. The problem is the proper way to tithe is off of what you actually gross. The term gross income literally means it should be means before deductions. Whatever your gross income is, that is your income. In the Bible, they tithe off of substance before taxes. It is your income when you go to get a house. When they ask you how much you make a year, you don't give them your net, you give them your gross. It is your income when you go to buy a car. It is your income when you fill out an application and list your current salary. It is your income. The only time you get amnesia is when you... Now all of a sudden you're really confused. You wasn't confused no other time.
And the last thing we want to say when we look at the Carolingian Renaissance is the way in which Charlemagne reformed the church. Charlemagne was, of course, intimately tied, as was his father and grandfather, to the papacy. And Charlemagne continues the policies of enforcing and regulating the Catholic faith in his realms. And this can't be underestimated. As we've noted on a few occasions, if there's any faith that is in ascendancy in Northern Europe, it is Arianism at this point. There is Catholicism in other areas. Certain missionaries have made inroads in Northern Europe. But with the coming of Charlemagne, what you see is a Catholicizing movement in Northern Europe in which Charlemagne attempts to establish once and for all the Nicene faith for all of Europe. And so Charlemagne does a number of things to ensure the regulation of the churches in his regions. It is Charlemagne who is the first to require the tithe be enforced in all of the churches. That is to say, 10% of all goods are to go to the church. Charlemagne also takes an interest in liturgy. He requires his churches to follow the liturgical pattern that had been established in Rome. He also makes efforts to ensure that the clergy are well educated, or at least sufficiently educated. At one point, he is concerned about the poor quality of sermons in his regions, and so he has drawn up a list of model sermons that he believes ought to at least be read aloud if the person who is giving the sermon is unable to come up with the sermon on his own. And so Charlemagne is the first major step towards developing a cohesive Catholic identity in Western Europe. The dominance of the papal Catholic religion in Western Europe, in Northern Europe, might have been delayed, if not attenuated entirely. But with a strong figure stressing the Catholic faith and stressing papal obedience, we see Europe develop increasingly in the Middle Ages towards a unified Catholic Church.